Hello again, S3 Biology. It's Mr. Kinnear with another video lesson for your Life on Earth unit. Today we're going to look at building the pyramids. Don't worry, you've not stumbled into a history lesson. We're going to look at pyramids of energy and numbers. So this is our learning intention for today. We're going to develop your knowledge and understanding of pyramids of energy, numbers and biomass. And you're hopefully going to be able to display food chains as pyramid diagrams. You compare pyramids, energy, number and biomass, and recognise and explain the shape of irregular pyramids. So again, I'm going to tell you what to do. This will be on Show My Homework, but it's also the end of the slide pack as well. So you're going to write down, how is energy lost in a food chain? Also, how much energy is passed on and what is it used for? You're going to write down the definitions for pyramid of energy, numbers and biomass. You're also going to draw the examples provided of those three different pyramids. Go write down what normally happens to the numbers and sizes of organisms as you go up a food chain. And at the end of that, you're going to complete the quick quiz on forms. So in the last couple of lessons, we've looked at food chains and food webs. We've seen that the arrows in a food chain or food web represent the flow of energy. So for instance, a mouse being eaten by an owl, the energy flow is from the mouse to the owl. But not all energy passes from the mouse to the owl. Some of it is lost. So can you think about how some energy might be lost from a food chain? So it's not passed on from the mouse to the owl. Here's some examples, and one of the reasons I said owl. On the right hand side we have an owl pellet, so effectively this is regurgitated material that the owl has not digested. And as you can see, there's clearly some bones, etc., that the owl has not been able to digest, and therefore any energy in that the mouse had has not been passed on. Also as well, our other two pictures, fire or heat and movement. So those things are not passed on from one part of the food chain to the other. They're lost. So if we use the mouse as an example, here we have it. It's had its breakfast, it's taken in lots of energy from the food it's eaten. However, as you can see, it's moving. So the energy it's using to move is not going to be passed on to the owl if it gets eaten. If it reproduces, again, that will take up energy and it can't be passed on. Body function, so thinking, even just digestion, requires energy. Heating its body also requires energy, and if it doesn't digest every ounce of energy from its meal and passes it out in its poop, then again, that's not going to be able to be passed on to an owl that eats it. However, growth, so if it gets bigger, if it bulks up, if it becomes more muscly, so the energy used to create growth in that mouse can be passed on to the owl. So in a food chain, the energy that's passed on from one step in the chain to the next is the energy used in growth. Now, on the previous slide, you saw several ways that energy was lost from the food chain, and you saw on one way that energy is passed on. So that should help answer one of the questions you've been asked today. But also as well, think about how much is passed on. So again, this is one of the answers that I'd like you to get in your jotters. Only about 10% of the energy in one level gets passed on to the next because it's the one used for growth. Okay, so very small amount of energy that is passed on from one level to the next. So biologists use a pyramid of energy to document and visualize that energy that's passed on from one level to the next. And again, this definition is something you need in your jotters. A pyramid of energy shows the total available energy at each level of a food chain. You should also remember from your S1 energy what energy is measured in. So hopefully you'll be shouting energy is measured in joules, J and kilojoules, kg. So a kilojoule being 1000 joules. So that's what energy is measured in. So to give you an example of a pyramid of energy, we've got sunflower, cricket, rat and eagle. So we're going to say the primary producer, the sunflower, has 10,000 joules. And you should know then only 10% is passed on, so we've got 1000 joules, and then 100 joules, and then only 10 joules. So besides your definition of pyramid of energy, I'd like you to draw this version. So just something to add to your previous diagram, So obviously our producer had 100% of the energy. So it's the thing that's putting energy into this system by taking light energy from the sun and creating chemical energy. The first consumer only gets 10% of that. The second consumer, 1%, and then the third consumer, only 0.1%. So you don't need to draw a new pyramid, you just need to add those details onto it. So 100%, 10%, 1%, and 0.1%. And what you might be able to see here is that the further you get away from the producer, the less energy you are getting. So even if you think about a food chain within our system, what you eat, the further down the line you are in terms of a consumer, the less energy you're going to get from this process. Now we'll move on to pyramid of numbers. And we'll give you a food chain that you're familiar with from last week: algae, waterflea, stickleback, pike. Now hopefully you might remember the sizes of these organisms that I talked about last week. Size-wise, you're going from really small to large. So pike is about 1.5 meters, in some instances, really ferocious fish, but also as well, number-wise, again, we're going to go from lots to few. So this relationship, as you go up a food chain, I want you to write down what happens to the number and the size. So you can either draw it like this or just think, as you go up a food chain, it goes from small to large, and as you go up a food chain, it goes from lots to few in terms of number. Now you don't have to draw this one, this is just an example, but that food chain would have this pyramid of numbers. So a huge amount of algae going to a very small amount of pike. So the numbers reduce as you go up the food chain. Again, definition-wise, pyramid of numbers is a diagram showing the numbers of organisms at each stage of a food chain. So that's a definition we'd like you to have in your jotters. There we go. And beside that definition of pyramid of numbers, use this information to create your own pyramid of numbers. So one heron eats 8 frogs that have eaten 50 slugs, devoured 200 lettuces. So that obviously starts at lettuce to slugs to frogs to herons. You should be able to create a fairly simple pyramid of numbers from this information beside your definition. Pyramid of numbers, however, can sometimes be a bit wonky. Because of the numbers, it can take a different shape, which makes it less useful for understanding what's happening in the food chain. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Oak tree here. It's obviously one oak tree, which can sustain lots of insects, and the insects can sustain lots of woodpeckers. Or grass to rabbit, and the rabbits can sustain a huge number of fleas on them. So again, the numbers at the top are actually larger than the numbers in the middle. So you've got wonky pyramids. So we've got a way around that. And that's a pyramid of biomass. If weight or mass, so mass of biological material or biomass, is used instead of numbers, the pyramid shape is restored. So there's an example. It's not quite the same as the previous ones, but as you can see, our oak tree down at the bottom is now a bit more of a normal shape because we're measuring the biomass of one oak tree rather than just the number. So it goes in the standard pyramid shape up here. Okay, so a pyramid of biomass shows the total mass of organisms at each level of a food chain, and the unit of biomass is grams per meter squared. So again, this definition is something that needs to go in your jotters. So we're going to draw 2 more pyramids just to make sure we get our heads around that. We'll use the information in the table below to draw a pyramid of biomass next to a pyramid of numbers. So again, we've got that oak tree, caterpillar, blue-tit sparrowhawk. We know that in a pyramid of numbers, that's going to be a bit wonky. The biomass, however, will straighten it out and make it a proper pyramid shape. So use that information to create a pyramid of biomass next to a pyramid of numbers. So just to clarify what you should be doing in your notes or jotters this week, write down how energy is lost in a food chain, how much energy is passed on from one level to the next, and what is it used for. Writing down the definitions for the 3 pyramids, energy, number, and biomass, and drawing the examples which I discussed. Also, what normally happens to the numbers and sizes of organisms as you go up a food chain, and complete the quick quiz on forms, and that'll be you. So that'll hopefully check your knowledge and how much you've taken in. Any problems, questions, queries, get in touch. We're happy to help you. Hopefully this has been another good lesson. Any feedback will be much appreciated, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye.